Peace and welcome to the show, folks. Tonight we got a lot to talk about. First, we're going to talk about Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook. We're going to talk about how their weak earnings has affected the stock market and the culture. We'll be checking in with Professor Iram Sinwright from American University to get his insights and thoughts on the matter. Also, let's talk about voting rights being under attack, folks. Voting in states across the country is up for grabs because this is an election year. We'll check in with the former president of the Baltimore chapter of the Naacp to get his thoughts about what we're seeing with this level of voter suppression. And more importantly, do you think it's going to affect this year's senatorial, gubernatorial races across the country? And if democracy will truly win? We'll have that conversation, of course, and I got my culture crew, so stay riding with us. It's all coming at you here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the show. Oh man, what a show we got for you tonight. All right, now look, I'm going to talk to you about something that I think is absolutely fascinating. I am truly fascinated by the idea and the thought and the power of the social force. I know we like to call it social media, but I think we need to redefine it to call it the social force of Facebook, or AKA Meta. This company has taken in a lot of money. This company has caused, a change in so many different ways. And just a couple of days ago, they reported that their earnings, their users, the amount of money that they're bringing in and their active users have actually declined. Yeah, Facebook. Now, Facebook already has billions of followers across the globe. And last year, folks, in 2021, Meta earned a staggering $100 billion. Not even joking. I'm talking about $100 billion. Now, the founder of Meta, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, he said that $10 billion is going to be used and dedicated to build the metaverse, and that he projects that within the end of the decade, that we should be able to play in a virtual world. Yeah, I'm still processing that. I'm personally still processing it. But he has been on it. Now, since the fact that Facebook has decided to kind of go into this space, because originally, you remember, Facebook used to be a place where you can just meet family and friends, connect with people you haven't seen in a while. It was a social tool. It was a social media. Hey, I haven't seen you. Hey, check me out on Facebook. Remember those days? Well, things have changed. And now Facebook, the once burgeoning, emerging startup of some college students, it's like a behemoth on Wall Street. It has taken over on so many different levels, from advertising to influence and power. And essentially, it has become the iconic cultural tool that has shaped our lives. I want to say that one more time. The iconic cultural tool that has shaped our lives. You might not believe that Facebook or Instagram or the WhatsApp, those are the apps that Meta owns. You might not believe that they have shaped our lives, but they did. They have, and they continue to shape our lives in such a way, folks. This is why I think we need to have the conversation, because they have shaped our lives in such a way that it has taught us what to think, how to see ourselves, and how to see the world around us. That's how powerful this platform really is. Yes, it started off with just, some would say, pure intentions. But then somewhere along the line, it became this other thing, right? We saw with January 6th, for example, that, even before January 6th, Facebook has been under great scrutiny because of the lack of security on its site, from everything from essential information like names and other essential information to non-essential data, but usable data. And it has shown us that this platform that has started off just to connect family and friends has become a cash cow for advertisers. 100 billion. Now let's not lose sight of that. 100 billion in 2021. Can we also say that was the same year that a pandemic was happening? A type of company with that much money, with that many resources, will have that much power. And that's what we're seeing. There is no way, and this is part of why we're having this conversation with Professor Senwright in a moment. There will be no way for us to figure out or to stop this train. There is, the United States government has only been around for a couple of hundred years, right? A little bit less than 300 years. There's nothing in the Constitution to cover social media. There's nothing in the Bill of Rights to cover social media. There isn't a digital Bill of Rights. There isn't a digital constitution. There isn't anything like that. And as long as Facebook has been around, and we can clearly see that Facebook has been around for about 20 years, how come we haven't really dived in to creating some infrastructure, some legislation, some policy on how to manage or how to, for lack of a better word, and I know some of you might push back on this, and that's fine, but we do need to control it. It does need to be regulated. No, it's not a private, it's not a public entity, it's not a government institution, but it does shape the culture so much that it affects how government does its work. So what do we do with a platform like this? What do we do when millions and billions of people log in every day to look, to read, to experience, quote unquote, social media, social connections on this and that space? What do we do with that? And yet it's not regulated. Now let's go to January 6th, because January 6th was a huge issue. Prior to January 6th, Facebook had its security issues. Prior to January 6th, there were many calls for Facebook to fix its algorithms, because they found out the algorithms responded, or they were engineered to reward offensive language and offensive behavior by putting it at the top of your feed. And then for those of us who just want to say, hey, I'm at the beach, look, that stuff was put at the bottom of the feed. Now comes January 6th, and they are finding out each and every day that there are connections to messages that have been posted on Facebook. There have been conversations on Facebook that has led to people asking questions about the legitimacy of the election. I mean, all of these things. And guess what? Mark Zuckerberg, I mean, he's moving. He's not worried about those things. He's still in the space of building the next world, the next new reality. And I have to say, folks, I feel like we're going down a very dangerous and slippery slope if we don't have an opportunity to stop and reflect and to pause. And you remember, that's what I said at the beginning of this show, that this is a platform that's designed to get us to stop and to reflect on what is going on with our culture, to make sure it's like a mental and emotional check-in, like, we good? Are we all right? Because guess what? At this point, we're not all right. The platform has become the source of news. The platform has become the source of anything that you want to know. The platform has become the source of our lives. We spend many, many hours on social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whatever your platform is, but we spend a lot of time on social media. At the dinner table, in the car, at school and work, it has become and has consumed our lives. And I think it's important for us, for us to pause and reflect and to say to ourselves, what are we doing? What is happening? What's the end? What is the impact of all of this? What's the implication that things will be better, things will be different? Went down for the day because Facebook went down for the day. They had lost in a one day, folks, I'm throwing out these numbers because I want you to have a better understanding of the context. They lost in a single day $250 billion. The value of Facebook has declined in a single day because of their ratings. When they put their earnings report out there, they lost people. They lost money. The users aren't engaged quite as much. They're losing. And as a result of that, look how much it has affected the financial landscape of the country. What does that mean to us? What does that really say to us? That means that this platform, this cultural tool, has power. And if you're still in a state of denial about how much power social media really has, then you're living under a rock. I'm have to tell you, and it's a big rock, okay? But this platform has power. And we need to figure out very, very soon, very, very quickly, and most importantly, we need to be intentionally responsible on how we're going to address the cultural impact, the financial impact, and most importantly, the health and well-being of this tool on the American people. We got to talk about that. We got to talk about that. And if we don't, we're going to see things continue to go into this uncharted, unregulated space. And that's not a good place for any of us to be in. And that's certainly not good for the culture. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's check in with Professor Iram Senwright, who studies media and the intersection of technology and social economics. Let's talk about what is going on with Meta. Let's talk about the implications and so much. We're also going to be joined by Culture Crew members Bakari Jones and Shaquaya McKenzie. So stay riding with me. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood-Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, kicking off our first conversation today is a conversation about Meta and how the company formerly known as Facebook and how it has affected every place of our lives, from the financial end to the cultural side. Now, I'm going to be joined in a moment by Professor Iram Sinwright of American University. Professor Sinwright serves as a media professor. He's an author, and he also serves as the chair of communication studies at American, to give us some insight about the power of technology and people. And, you know, there is a term that I have read that some social scientists have coined as social economics. Now, I shared with you the earnings that Facebook brings in. You know, last year they brought in $100 billion, $46 billion was in profits. They're spending $10 billion to create this metaverse, this alternate reality. But the other side of it is not just the money that they're bringing in, it's just the fact that they have access to so many people. And then when you have access to so many people, are you using that data? How are you using that data? How are you making sure that people aren't just being exposed to any and everything? So there's the security issue. Then there's the issue that because Facebook is an unregulated space or unregulated platform, any and everything can be said. So then now you're starting to see those divisions between people being exacerbated on the platform. And then you got to talk about the fact that, is Facebook also an instigator in some cases? You know, when you're talking about, and I was reading some pieces and some articles that said that in other parts of the world, a lot of, some small battles, and I'm not joking, folks, small battles have been started because of engagements and conversations and interactions on the platform. How do you handle this? Let's bring in Professor Iram Sinwright from American University to give us some thoughts on this. Professor, thank you so much for joining us. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm good. Professor, I hope to lay out the foundation of the severity of what we're dealing with when we're talking about social media, but in particular about Meta.
Sure.
You know, one of the big things, Professor, that struck out for me is that, you know, the amount of money and I want you to explain to our watchers how this works, because when people hear that a company brings in $100 billion in revenue for a platform that is free to use, that is downloadable right on your phone to use, then where does the money come from?
That's a great question. So the way that academics in my field talk about it, we use the term surveillance capitalism. I'm sure you're familiar with this term. It was coined by the great theorist Shoshana Zuboff.
Got her book right here, Professor. I had to make sure we get prepared because this book right here changed
that's
me right
it.
here.
Yeah,
this
so
book
basically,
changed me. Yep.
Think about it this way, right? There are roughly 2 billion people, more than a quarter of the Earth's population on Facebook. Every single one of those people has a web of relationships to other human beings, to institutions like schools and doctors and banks and the criminal justice system and civic institutions, all of these relationships between different individuals carries a certain capacity, has a certain amount of power in it. And Facebook's brilliant business model has been to become the kind of gateway that separates us from the people we would otherwise be connected to. So it could be that I'm your friend, Farajii, and the two of us want to have a conversation. Facebook has insinuated itself into that relationship so that we can't have a conversation without the platform. It could be that I want to check in with my university and see what kinds of students are going to be coming into my program in the fall. Facebook has insinuated itself into that relationship so that when I connect with my students, it becomes the platform that unites us. So Facebook has become this kind of necessary social infrastructure. And essentially what it's able to do is to charge a fee to companies that have budgets for marketing and promotion and distribution to get access to their own customer bases. So it's not just about me as an individual, Aram Sinreich, as a professor, as a friend of Faraji's, what have you. Let's say that, I'm also a musician, by the way, and I have a band, and that band has a new album coming out this summer, right? Typically, in the olden times, I would go and play some shows, and I would tell my fans, guess what? New album is dropping, right? I'd show up on the radio. I'd tell my fans, check it out. Come to the store in a couple of months. The new album's going to be out. Now, Facebook provides the platform where the fans find out about the music and the music professionals find out about their fans, and they sell the music professional access to their own fans. So monetizing those relationships that already existed while simultaneously becoming essential to the process of maintaining those relationships is the Facebook business model.
And that's something, going back to Shoshana Zuboff's book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, the book is called The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power. One of the things that she brought up was the fact that this really was kind of this level of engagement with people, and more importantly, this level of collection of data was something that we saw with Google. That Google had really mastered how you collect people's data and then use their data to create, a world where if a person logs in, you're getting ads that speaks to your interests and your preferences. Am I correct on that, Professor?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like an onion, right? There are layers and layers and layers. So it begins with Google about 20 years ago, figuring out that you could turn a search engine into an advertising platform. That basically you could sell, let's say that I knew that somebody was searching for apartment rentals in Baltimore, right? That if I was selling apartments, I could buy ads against that search itself, right? And that was that was Google's big insight 20 years ago, was that when people are looking for information, that's when to hit them with marketing information. Okay, so that's the first layer of the onion. Then Google begins to say, well, it's not really just about people searching on our website. What if somebody goes to rentalhomes.net and looks for an apartment in Baltimore? We want to be able to sell that to advertisers too, right? So then they broaden it out so the entire internet becomes a kind of point of contact that you can mine data from. Then you get to the next point, which is, okay, once you've extracted those data from people's social interactions, those data themselves become a commodity that you can put on the market. And what's happened now in the last 10 or so years is that there's an entire infrastructure of what are known as data brokers who don't make anything, they don't sell anything, they don't even sell advertisements. They certainly don't offer free websites and services to consumers. All they do is collect data from different sources, bundle them together, analyze them, create detailed predictive profiles of every single one of us, and then resell those to third parties. And that is a multi-billion, hundreds of billions of dollars spent every year just on this data brokerage industry. And so that social media becomes a service that basically justifies data extraction rather than vice versa. It's not like it's not like our data pays for the wonderful thing that Facebook gives us. It's that Facebook exists only for the purpose of extracting data that become valuable to them.
Okay, so now, Professor, because I know some folks are listening to you this afternoon and thinking to themselves like, what? So now the big $64,000 question becomes, what do they do with all of that data?
So I'm actually writing a book about this right now, and my co-author and I just got off of our weekly phone call right before I did this interview, and every single time it's like we just want to slam our heads against the desk because it's so depressing. But basically they hold on to it. So what's the other thing that's happened over the last 10 years is that you might have noticed, you buy a phone, that phone's got more gigabytes than the version that you bought 4 years earlier. And that had twice as many gigs as the one that you bought 4 years before that. That's because the price of computer memory continues to keep dropping precipitously according to Moore's law. So a hard drive that would have cost $1,000 10 years ago now costs $50 for the same amount of storage. So from a business standpoint, from the standpoint of the data brokers that we were just talking about, what that means strategically is it makes sense for them to collect as much data as possible and hold on to it for as long as possible, even if they don't know what the data mean, and even if they don't know what they're going to do with it or how they're going to sell it. Because they know that a piece of data that they collect from you today might not mean anything to them at the moment, but 5 years down the line, they're going to have some new algorithm that's going to be able to make sense of it, and they're going to be able to sell it for a buttload of money based on like a long-term analysis of who you are and what your life is about, right? So all of these different companies, dozens and dozens and dozens of different companies, not to mention government entities here in the US and elsewhere around the globe, Russia, China, are collecting massive amounts of data about what every single person is doing online and offline, anywhere in contact with a networked computer, all day, every day, and they're just archiving it, just stockpiling it, and then after the fact, inventing new algorithms that sort through those data and try to deliver some kind of actionable intelligence from them.
So we're a part, when we say that we are logging in, we become logged into a system that commodifies our preferences, that commodifies our likes, dislikes. We become part of a system that monetizes us, our existence.
Even beyond that, it's one step worse than that, because it's not
worse than that.
It is, because it's not like there's like a little recording angel sitting on our shoulder, just walking around being like, "Oh, Farajii had toast for breakfast today."
Right.
Put that in the ledger, right? It's more like the recording angel goes, "Oh, it's going to be more valuable for us if Farajii has eggs. Farajii, have some eggs. Farajii has some eggs. Farajii, have some eggs."
And that request comes from the advertiser. So that, if you're "Oh, I had hot dogs," then they're like, "Oh, Heinz ad might come up and say you need ketchup."
Let me be even more clear.
Gotcha.
The whole script has flipped. It's no longer let's collect data to figure out how to advertise to you. It's become let's make you do things in order to create the kind of data that we need. And so it's not just about showing you an ad. It's about what is, you might have read recently that the US federal government is going after Google and other big tech companies for what they call dark patterns. And dark patterns are basically a way of changing the arrangement of information on a screen, or changing the way that an application works, or even changing the way that public space is organized to nudge you into behaving one way instead of behaving another way, to have eggs instead of toast for breakfast, to wear green instead of blue, to pray to this God instead of that God, right? I mean, they can be decisions large or small, but there are all these very powerful algorithms that understand how to give you the smallest possible push to produce the biggest possible change in your behavior, so that you will be more and more willing, without your knowledge or consent, to yield data that then become more and more valuable in a brokerage market. So there's this feedback loop. It's invaded our public physical space. It's not just about what we do on our laptops or our phones anymore, because everywhere we go, there's an Amazon Echo, or there's a closed circuit television, or facial recognition algorithm. There's some kind of internet connected sensor that's collecting data from what you do, whether you think you're online or not. You're essentially always online.
Professor, I have an Echo, and I did notice that it picks up on, even without, asking Alexa what to do, it does pick up on certain things. Like you can still see it light up when you're just having basic conversations with your family members, right? And I think that is this big slippery slope that I think that we need to be aware of, because this is putting us in a space where, you know, we have this great reliance on technology, almost to the detriment of our own independence, in some cases to the detriment of our own sanity. So it's mind-blowing. I want to bring in one of our cultural crew members, Bakari Jones, who is an activist, and she's a strategic planner for, you know, a lot of nonprofit organizations, and she's been currently working in the tech space. Bakari, thank you so much for checking in with us this afternoon. How are you?
Farajii, I'm well. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Bakari, you actually have been doing work in technology. You know, your current work, I mean, you've been doing work in the community for years, but your current work has been using technology to help nonprofits and to help, small businesses move further along. But when you hear hear this information that Professor Sinwright is sharing about the power of social media and in technology, what stands out for you?
Oh man, so many things. One, Professor, thank you for coming on and sharing your insight. I think it's just amazing to see the ways that technology is able to shape our behavior. And I think a lot of times we envision a space where we're directing technology, and in a lot of ways, technology is directing us. And a lot of our folks are just now starting to realize that. So I think it's interesting. I'm curious about what resistance in a technical space is going to look like as we move forward. You know, besides protecting our cookies and requiring different levels of security on our devices, you know, what else does resistance look like in that space?
That's a big question. Professor.
Well, I think Bakari is right that it's not just about, you know, protecting what kinds of data we leak, right? So there's a big kind of push for what people refer to as media literacy. Like, oh, well, if you don't like Facebook's policies, then don't use Facebook. Or if you have to use Facebook, then go into the privacy settings and change setting X and change setting Y and change setting Z. If you think about it, that's not really fair to us, to the end user, because what it's basically saying is that we're going to presumptively spy on you. And if you don't want to be spied on, it's your job to figure out how to prevent that from happening and to go around and tell every single website what not to do. Right? And like, imagine, like, you know, again, let's bring this back into the physical world. Imagine every time you walked into a neighborhood, you had to go first to the police station and tell them, you know, not to follow you around. That would be ridiculous, right? Mm-hmm. And then, you know, if you don't do that, then the cops are just going to trail you wherever you go. But now imagine that instead of like there being like one cop for every 100 people, there's 100 cops for every one person. And that's essentially the situation with surveillance capitalism, is that there are more collection algorithms than there are human beings. And there's no way, if we spent all of our time telling these algorithms what not to collect, we would still not be able to change all of our terms of service. So then to Bakari's question is like, what does resistance actually look like? How do you dissent in an environment of totalistic surveillance and data extraction? And, you know, there are a lot of different answers, but the big answer has to be that we as a society all decide that it's unacceptable, and that we hold these organizations accountable, and that we don't integrate them into our businesses, into our governments, into our schools, into our cultures, and, you know, we build a network that doesn't surveil us.
Well, you know what, Professor, and I think that sounds good, and I think, Bakari, you probably will agree on this because of how I think I know you. But one of the big things is, you know, we are so integrated with the platform, with the technology, that now it almost seems like it's like we're in prehistoric times to remember what life was like before the technology was brought into existence. And so some of us are just so ingrained, and I get it. I mean, we're in a digital space as it is, but I think that there is a call for us to be digitally responsible, where we're not just collecting data and holding it and using it and trying to monetize it, but we want to engage people with technology in a safe, responsible fashion. And it sounds like we have to make that choice, Professor and Bakari. to make that happen, to change the culture of how we use technology? Professor, I'm on the right track here?
I think you are. I mean, it's easy to say, but it's hard to do, right?
Facts.
Because again, like no single individual can affect a change in mass consciousness. So I think, unfortunately, like a student of history would say that these things only change once you hit a breaking point. Once, like a critical mass of people rise up and say, this is not acceptable. We can't live in a society like this. And, in 1215, farmers in Europe and in England rose up and, they made the crown sign the Magna Carta because the way that they were operating was not appropriate. In 1776, the U.S. had its own revolution from England. In the 1860s, we had our own civil war over slavery, right? Like this systemic injustices of this scale are never solved through incremental change. They're really only solved through a revolution of one kind or another. And that doesn't have to be a bloody political revolution. It could be a cultural revolution. But something systemic has to change.
And so, Professor, talk to us about how does do communities, that vulnerable communities, those communities that have often been used and abused by the system, like the Black community or the LGBTQIA community or the Latino community, I mean, how do these communities protect themselves when they're on these in the social spaces?
Well, unfortunately, there's a lot of really strong research showing that existing social inequities and biases are not only reproduced, but are exaggerated by these platforms, right? You've probably seen the documentary Coded Bias, which does a good job of documenting and explaining this kind of process. So the answer is that, vulnerable communities and populations can't participate in this process in a way that protects them. All they can do is to be self-aware of what the risks are and to create safer private spaces where these kinds of power dynamics don't come into play, which unfortunately balkanizes our society and drives us further apart from one another.
Right. And see, Bakari, for me, that sounds like, it doesn't sound like all hope is lost, but it sounds like, we
might need a flashlight to find it, though.
You know what I'm saying? You might need a flashlight. Perfect way of saying it. I mean, go ahead. What you just going to say?
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, I think to the professor's point, I think we are ultimately looking for ways to like humanize some of this technology, and those things are really at odds with each other.
That's unrealistic.
I think we have so much technology, and I think one of the pieces that's missing is sort of where is the opportunity for us to engage and leverage our empathy, right? Like it makes no sense to capture so much data. It takes up so much space and time. It consumes a lot of resources when we don't know how we're going to use and leverage that data, especially we're not going to use it or leverage it for good. So I think that one of the ways that I imagine that we could push back, and I think it would take a lot of collective action from folks that are in the technical and digital justice spaces, would be to figure out how we can limit the collection of data, and I know that's not what really a thing that people want to hear, but it could become something where, we have to say, how do you intend to use this? Otherwise, does it actually need to be captured? So
you know what? And I agree with you there. And I think, one of the big things that we have to, well, two things that you said, Bakari, that really got my attention. One is we do try to humanize technology. And that is the narrative that is often used to sell technology. I mean, we've given technology real names. It's not like Bot 345. It's Alexa. You know what I'm saying? It's when we have created this world in such a way where it opens the door for us to want to be one with a machine in a very, very like surreal, dystopian type of way, But then the other thing I think you talked about, which is important, is the moral factor. We got to take a quick break, but Professor Senwright, when we're talking about the moral factor of proper technology or proper use of technology, there are many conversations that are happening about this, but I'm wondering if that is even a realistic goal for us to ask for, to say, hey, tech makers and tech giants and tech companies, make sure that you are responsible. Make sure you're socially responsible. Make sure you're politically correct. Make sure that you understand that there are many different people in the world. Make sure that your technology speaks to the diversity of our culture. I'm wondering if that's even realistic. I'm wondering, can we even apply any type of moral regard to technology in this day and time? Don't answer that just yet, Professor, but let's talk about it when we come back. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, more conversation with Professor Iram Sinwright from American University, Bakari Jones, and also we'll be joined by another Culture Crew member, Shaquaya McKenzie, as we're talking about Meta, aka the company formerly known as Facebook, and its impact on our finances and our culture. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all. All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, we've been talking to Professor Iram Sinwright, who serves as the Associate Professor and Chair of Communication Studies at American University, as we talk about the issue or the big conversation around Meta, aka the company formerly known as Facebook, and talking about, you know, the fact that they've earned a lot of money over the past year. Their earnings actually dropped in their new earnings report that came out, and this earnings, the lack of earnings, has also caused investors and the market to go into a deep dive. And so we're looking at this intersection of technology and finance and culture and how it affects you and I. Also joining us has been Culture Crew member Bakari Jones, who is an activist and strategic planner. And then we also will be joined by Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an educator, who is another member of the Culture Crew. Professor Sinwright, I want to go back to you because I posed a really like a big question of morality. can we impose or can we apply any type of morality to, this level of technology?
Yeah, I think we have to, because if morality has a meaning, that meaning is that we agree on what right and wrong is when it comes to social organizations and interactions and institutions.
Yeah.
And tech, as we were talking about before, has become integral to all of those things. So if we give it a pass on our moral judgments, then we've basically given up on morality overall. The problem is, how do we turn those kinds of moral judgments into action, as Bakari was talking about? How does that become social change? How does that become justice? And, the answer is that it's really not all that different than what we've seen in the past. These are large, powerful institutions that have a financial and political plan that might differ from our own. And we have to use the power of culture, the power of the marketplace, and the power of democratic society to make them conform to our expectations and our morality. And so the more clear we are about the underlying values, whether those values are racial justice, diversity and inclusion, or any other kind of moral standpoint we might have, the clearer we are about how that intersects with specific technological standards and procedures, the more effective we can be.
And it's interesting because just as much as we talk about morality, I remember there was an article that was done about Facebook Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg. And back in January of 2010, and Professor Senwright, you might remember when he made the statement, but back in January of 2010, folks, Mark Zuckerberg was doing a talk at an award ceremony in San Francisco. And he said that privacy was no longer a quote unquote social norm. He said people have really gotten comfortable not only sharing more information in different kinds, but more openly and with more people. That social norm is just something that has evolved over time. That privacy is no longer a social norm. This was 12 years ago that he made this statement, and we're seeing now that people are putting themselves out there, putting out their business, in the sense of, or the value of privacy is just not there anymore. I'm wondering, Bakari, are we kind of going down a slippery slope here if we aren't keeping certain values and morals intact?
Well, I push back a little bit. I think that the desire for privacy, I think, still exists. I think in a lot of ways we know, many of us know, that a lot of what we're seeing on social media is what we call like the highlight reel. So we have a desire to have some privacy, right? These are the things that I want to show you. Now, we might be showing more and more of those pieces along the way, but I think there's still a desire for some privacy, right? We know that it's very rare that 100% of our lives are being streamed online. So I do think that there's still some desire for privacy. I think it's unfortunate because a lot of us are, living under a lot of pressure under capitalism and looking for ways to monetize our lives. So it becomes more enticing to share more and more of those elements. But I think that I see that as a fine line between, to the professor's point, yes, there are a lot more spaces where we're interacting and engaging where we don't realize that we're being surveyed. But that's not the same as saying I'm opting in to be surveyed. That's not the same thing. So
no,
I think, back to it not being the responsibility for the consumer to opt out, I think I see privacy in the same way.
Absolutely. And you know what? And Professor, I know one of the big things that has, since Facebook has announced its earnings, one of the big things that has crippled the social media giant is the fact that Apple, they have put changes on limiting Meta. They have said that they introduced this update on Apple iPhones, which is called the App Tracking Transparency. For those who don't know, it's an update on the mobile operating system. Basically, it gives iPhone owners the choice to let apps like Facebook monitor their online activities. Now, folks, I'm not an iPhone. I have an Android. So, but for iPhones, you can opt out. Speaking to Bakari's point, you can opt out whether Facebook can monitor your online activities, and as a result of Apple putting that tracking or that feature, Facebook is like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they have found that a lot of people, a lot of Apple iPhone users have decided to opt out. And they say that may be one of the reasons why Facebook hasn't earned the type of money this quarter that it was expected to earn. Professor, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. But I wouldn't give Apple a pass. It's not like it's a company that really cares about you, and Facebook isn't. Part of what's happening right now is that these consumer data are so economically valuable that every company is basically trying to change the way that the internet works from a technological standpoint and a regulatory standpoint, to divert more of that value that comes from data into their pockets and away from their competitors' pockets. So you should view this more as kind of Apple trying to build up what people call the walled garden, a universe in which you will only want to use Apple products, hardware and software and services, so that they can collect and control more of your data, and Facebook and Google and Amazon have access to less and less of it.
Yeah. And I think the other part that we can't forget is the simple fact that a lot of younger users that Facebook has traditionally been able to grab and catch the market of now are leaving. They're saying that the app is dated, and so you're seeing other platforms like TikTok and other video sharing platforms kind of emerging as the platform of choice for the next generation, which is interesting enough. Shaquay, I want to get you an opportunity to jump in very quickly before Professor Senwright signs off. But what's your take on all of this, as you've been working in both the social justice and the education spaces?
I have to agree to your last point that as an educator, primarily focused with secondary students, middle school through high school, and collegiate students, Facebook is old. Facebook is for old people, as they say. And so I think the approach that they are trying to take, albeit whether you look at the approach considering their focus on marketing or in general trying to induce AI, it's just not going to be appealing enough to catch the market that it is they're trying to attract and maintain with the younger generation. And therefore we have to think about, for older generations, or for myself, the millennial generation, we're not considered that old yet, but in terms of thinking about how we interact with the platform, I know a number of people that have left Facebook too, right, for the very reason that they feel their privacy has been embarked on to no regard with their concerns about what they joined the platform for, which was really just to maintain community amongst their friends and family. And so I think that the approach Facebook has taken is essentially a suicide mission.
We're going to see how this mission ends, though, Professor. We're going to see how this mission ends. We appreciate your time this afternoon to talk to us about this issue. We know you do have a new book coming out. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's called The Secret Life of Data. I'm writing it for MIT Press right now with my good friend Jesse Gilbert. And basically it's about all of the, when we talk about data, usually we talk about kind of what people are doing with it now. These data brokers, Facebook, Amazon, so on and so forth. This is about what happens to our data next. After they've stockpiled it, after they've collected it from every orifice, put it onto hard drives on a server somewhere, what is the next step for what happens to those data? What are the unusual and unexpected things that people will discover and create based on the data they're extracting today? So that book should be coming out hopefully in about 18 months.
That sounds awesome. Professor Iram Senwright, Associate Professor and Chair of Communication Studies at American University. Professor, thank you so much for joining us here today on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's talk about from technology to voting, sort of, kind of. We're going to talk about how there are even more suppressive tactics that are being taken right now in states across the country to keep Black people at bay and to keep Black people from not voting. we'll be checking in with Marvin Doc Cheatham, who served as the former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP, to give us some insight on what we can expect, how we can protect ourselves, and do we have the time to save the Black vote? We'll have that conversation up next. Also, we'll certainly give you the last word because we've had a very, very eventful week. So we got a lot to go to in the next hour. We got our culture crew members riding with us and a whole lot more. So you're tuned into The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome to the show here this afternoon. We just had a fantastic conversation about the impact of Meta, the company formerly known as Facebook, and its impact on finances and our culture. And I would definitely invite you to check out that conversation that we had with our culture crew members, Bakari Jones, Shaquaya McKenzie, and our special guest, Professor Iram Senwright. Now we want to shift gears from technology to voting. As you know, voting has been what's considered to be one of the major fundamental exercises of a healthy democracy. But over the past few years, voting has been under attack. Now, we just saw just a few weeks ago where major voting rights bills have been canceled in Congress, leaving many people to wonder what is going to be the state or the future of the vote in America especially during this election year. Now, even though we're preparing for the presidential election in 2024, it's 2022 this year. We're expected to fill seats in both the Congress as well as state, some local seats as well as state seats. So this is an important year. And as a community organizer, I was always told that all politics is local. No change can happen unless it's locally produced. And so what does that mean when you can't go to the ballot box and your vote is not counted? What does that mean when you go to the ballot box and your vote is not even there? This is the type of disparity that we have been seeing in this country. I want to share with you what's been happening in Washington State, because there was a state audit that was done by Pat McCarthy, who is a Democrat, who did his audit in Washington State to find that and it was reported by the New York Times, that among thousands of mail-in ballots that were cast for the 2020 election, that they were rejected in Washington State, and auditors have found that that those votes of Black residents were thrown out 4 times as often as those of white voters. Can you believe that, folks? 4 times as often. They are saying that pretty much the rejection, all of them because of problematic signatures, disqualified 1 out of every 40 mail-in votes from Black people. And they're saying that that is a finding that is already causing national concern, and it pushes the conversation around voter access and secure balloting to the limits. So I wanted to have a conversation about this, because if that level of disparity is just happening in Washington State, what should we expect in 2022 when we go to the ballot box this year? Here to give us some insight and possibly some recommendations on how we can deal with this issue is the former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP, my big brother, Marvin Doc Cheatham. Good evening, Brother Marvin. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Happy New Year. God bless you. And we're so excited about your new move in this program. We're fired up.
You've always been a very, very big supporter of us here, Doc. So I'm very, very humbled that you accepted the invitation. And most importantly, thank you so much for your love and your support. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Doc, when you look at this situation, like this situation in Washington State, they're talking about all of these ballots being thrown out. And, after this audit done. And now this audit has just been done. It's 2022. That's 2 years after the ballots were cast. I'm concerned that if we've cast our ballot in 2022, we probably won't know the real result until 2024. Oh, I know what happens in 2024. A presidential election. So now we got to go back to people are asked to go back to the voting, go back to the ballot box to cast their vote again, even though we don't know if the elections for the local and the state representatives actually were counted. This just seems like mass confusion. Like, from you've been doing this work for many years, Doc. You are a voting rights activist, specialist, advocate. You've been doing it for many years. But have you ever seen this level of suppression that we're currently seeing in the country right now?
I'm sad to say, Farajii, no, and I don't think anyone has. I spent 41 years as a government employee, as an election specialist. I served quite a few years heading up 3 civil rights organizations in Baltimore, including being the first African-American president of the Maryland Association for Election Officials. I prepared a brief statement to let you know how serious this is. I'm saying very strongly, we need to get everybody, or Lottie Dottie and everybody, involved in combating voter registration in every state in the United States. There have been over 440 restrictive laws that were introduced just last year in 2021. 49 states introduced new laws last year. 34 of them were anti-voter laws. and they have already passed in 19 states. Later on, I'll share with you what 19 states have actually passed voter suppression laws. Without federal legislation, and federal legislation is important, constituents are encouraged to join their voter efforts in every state. No state is not being attacked. As Congress considers the next steps in the fight to go against voter suppression, we're asking folks to move forward on voter registration. The Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and Human Rights, a coalition of more than 230 national organizations, and 53 of them are local organizations, have come together and basically said to the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer that the members of Congress need to support and remain, I quote this, to remain extremely focused in the weeks to come on the core of voter suppression that's taking place all over America. So it's more serious than I think it has ever been. We are going back to the 1920s and 30s and 40s. I think Dr. King and those leaders back in those days are turning over in their graves that we are seeing our voting rights, our voting laws turned back and going into the wrong direction, Farajii. And it's scary. We need to wake up.
And you know what? When you say it's scary, it is scary because now we are dealing with a new reality, Doc, that as much as we're seeing this mail balloting, this mail ballot issue, the fact remains that guess what? The Biden-Harris administration still don't have any strong leg to stand on because the voting rights bills, the two big voting rights bills, haven't been moved. They haven't been passed. And so that opens the door for even more attacks to come. Give us based upon your expertise and your experience, Doc, how serious was what were the bills and what can we expect as a result of those bills not passing?
Well, credit this to me, not to you, but somebody told us they got our back. And I swear to goodness, if that's what you call you got our back, I don't want you to have my back ever again.
Come on, man.
Four states, Farajii, have bungled together new voting restrictions. They're now calling them omnibus bills. These were Texas, Florida, Georgia, and Iowa. 4 different states, Arkansas, Montana, Texas, and Arizona, have passed new voter restriction laws. Many states have hit the ground running, and for instance, they are now imposing how you cast your votes, where you cast them, and 7 of these states now you got to do something to even apply. We're saying very clearly that there are 19 states that have passed very restrictive laws. Those states are Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Iowa, Indiana, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, New York, Massachusetts, and Florida. This is again Doc Tim saying this is not you, Farajii. I think we need to target all of them, but in particular, I'm going to suggest we target 5 at the outset. We need to target New York, Massachusetts, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. Now, why did I select them out of the 19? Well, guess what? These are blue states. These are blue states that pass laws suppressing our right to vote. And I'm saying very clearly that, folks, if ever we need to get actively involved in what's happening, which is voter suppression all over America, it's going to come very soon to your neighborhood. And we don't want you to call us up when the primary elections start. Now, our primaries start in June. But some start before us and some start a little bit later. But it's going to be too late if you're in November and all of these laws not only have passed, but they have implemented them. I'm saying, wake up. Wake up, America, Black America, white America, straight America, gay America. Right now, voting rights is on attack, and it's being attacked in front of our eyes.
Doc, we got to take a quick pause. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation with you. I'll bring in my culture crew members, Bakari Jones and Shaquaya McKenzie, and let's talk a little bit about the implications of voting, of these suppressive laws on voting rights. Stay riding with us, folks. It's The Culture right here, only on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Folks, we've been talking about the attack on voting rights in America. There have been a number of states that have been victims of suppressive attacks, like the state of Washington, where they found that mail ballots were being thrown out, especially mail ballots from Black voters were thrown out at a rate 4 times higher than white voters. And now it leaves us to ask the question, what is the future of the vote in this country? What is going to be the impact of our vote in this election cycle this year? We've been joined by Marvin Doc Cheatham, former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP and SCLC, and he continues to do the work of advocating for equal voting rights. Now we're also joined by my culture crew members, Shaquaya McKenzie and Bakari Jones, to share their thoughts as well. I want to bring in my culture crew here on this one. Shaquaya, you know, when you're listening to Doc and Doc is saying, look, you got all of these states that have voter suppression laws. You know, Brother Roland has often talked about how impactful this situation really is, how severe it really is. And when you start looking at the whole idea that people's ballots are being thrown out in one state, or they're not being counted in another state, or that polling places, like, for example, there have been a number of, pieces and articles that have said that polling places have become further out for certain members of Black and brown communities, so that permits them from voting. What do you say is the future of the vote and democracy at this point? Do we need to keep saying go out to vote, or does there be something else to activate our people to understand that our voice is being taken away and diminished every step of the way?
Well, Farajii, the truth is that the minority of this country, which is the Republican Party, is diminishing in front of their eyes, and the levers of power that they hold. This is all of these actions, all of these restrictive voter laws are of consequence of them realizing that their minority is in fact ironclad, and they're doing everything they can to maintain control. They're also depending on the distractedness of what they consider the liberal bloc or the Democratic bloc. And they're doing everything they can, in a sense, through the strict voter ID laws, the cuts to early voting, voter roll purges, in a sense, and in a hurried sense, to try to do everything they can in the last bit of power with this upcoming congressional and the local elections we have this year, in order to determine the outcome of the presidential election. This is all of consequence of the big lie that we know, that the Trump administration and his I don't want to say minions, but his counterparts in the Congress.
We can say minions. Let's say it. Let's call it for what it is.
And so
he despicable me's. He got a bunch of minions on him.
And so the what is incumbent upon the Democratic voting bloc, which is starting at the top, the Biden administration, and which leads down to the bottom in terms of grassroots organization, is to one, on the administration's side, they need to go to Arizona. They need to go to West Virginia. Let's be clear. Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are the ones who are holding up or have held up the legislation that would defeat these voter restrictions across the country. And therefore, there is this threat. I'm not sure what is happening in behind closed doors in the Biden administration, but their campaigns, there need to be more active campaigns in educating the voting blocs of Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema around the harm that they're doing to this country, not relevant just to their community and their constituents, but to the entire country. There needs to be a more proactive lens to talk about what's happening and to address what's happening in a way that moves the ball. Because let's be clear, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin haven't moved because of their corporate ties, right? And so there needs to be a more proactive offense to the people who are actually holding up progress. On the grassroots level, there needs to be more education campaigns. What was so effective, and we as a community of activists and or people who are involved in community organizing, we kind of opine about the glory days of Obama and why that was so successful, right? In terms of being able to transform the Democratic Party, where more young people and of different diverse demographics were more involved. It was about the grassroots level, about door-to-door canvassing. I know we're in the pandemic, so door-to-door may not be door-to-door, right? Maybe Zoom call to Zoom call. But there needs to be a more proactive edge of education, interaction, really meeting people where they are, especially the younger generation, and getting people involved in what's going on, not just talking around it on media channels, because I think that's what's happening. It's living in a bubble of people who are already concerned about it, who are already doing the work. We need to meet those who are not informed or who are not necessarily paying as much attention and bring them into the fold.
No, I think that you're absolutely right. And Bakari, thinking about that, one of my big concerns about, just where we are with this whole situation is that people will not get engaged. People will not come out to vote. The suppression tactics will turn off the next generation of voters, right? Especially coming from the Black community, the brown community, and other, marginalized communities. So I think that, to add to Shaquaya's point, there needs to be education, but then I feel like we're always on the defense. I feel like we're kind of protecting ourselves from the attack versus attacking. And I'm wondering, when do we start to attack? Because at this point, we just getting our ass kicked right now politically.
I'm inclined to agree, Farajii.
You're inclined to agree.
I think one of the things that ties together both Doc and Shakoya's points are, I think Doc brings the historical context, and I think Shakoya mentioned, the education. I feel like combining those two things together to create a media campaign that shows the history of these Voting Rights Act violations, I feel like will be something that will be incredibly powerful to show that it's not brand new. This is just the newest attempt, right, at stopping folks from voting. So that's something, at least for me, that I would like to see, because it kind of puts it in context. Once you see that, oh, okay, this is literally just the 2022 version of these same attempts, then I think that folks are really able to kind of take a step back and see the writing that's on the wall and understand the actual game that's being played. So
yeah, and I mean, and Doc, that's the thing about the games that are being played. I mean, and which is crazy considering the fact that we know that there are games being played. I mean, people are writing about the fact that Republicans in particular have implemented these strategies to keep people from voting so that way they can win elections. My question is, why haven't we seen that same sort of blatant effort coming from the Democratic side? I mean, yes, we can call it out all day. We can be like, oh, voter suppression, voter suppression. Or we can talk about, the fact that these ballot boxes are being picked up and these mail-in ballots are being thrown. We could say that. But I'm talking about some real action. And maybe I'm asking for too much about this, Doc, but why aren't we seeing that same level of urgency from the other side?
But let me first say this. I am so impressed with the three of y'all. I'm clear that our future looks bright because I can sit back and get back in my rocking chair because you three are expressing everything that I even thought about expressing. But I would say this. We keep playing chess, and the game is checkers and chess and backgammon. It's all the game. we got to look at the fact that they're throwing everything at us that they can. And we keep being reactive rather than proactive. One of the things that we need to do, not only keep nominating this great woman, these great women that should have been on the Supreme Court years ago, but here's a chess move. We need 2 more people on the Supreme Court. Biden and the vice president got to move to put 2 more people on the Supreme Court. Otherwise, we're going to be playing chess, and we're really playing Chinese checkers, because if we allow Supreme Court to turn back the hands of time in voting and change the voting laws again, we're going to be basically trying to count marbles in the jar or how many bubbles are in the jar, because voting rights will have gone backwards. And I'm just saying our future looks bright with the 3 of y'all and all the hundreds and thousands of young folks we have. And I'm just saying, let us old folks shut up, be quiet, and let you young folks do what you got to do, because we're in a fight and some of us ain't got the punch we used to have.
Right. Oh, wait, I can reframe that. I can rephrase that. Some of us don't have the testicular fortitude. I mean, seriously, guys, like as much as we talk about politics and all of that, there's a level of politics that's just absolutely abhorrent to the point where you're just like, I don't want to deal with it. But what I do hate watching is injustice. And what I do hate watching is that we have such a deep hope and belief. And I'm saying we as a people, as Black people, regardless of which community you may come from, we as Black people, we have a lot of hope in the American system that we are a part of, that the American system will automatically change based on the benevolence of any white person, or based upon the benevolence of some magic person, some person that's coming to save us. And that's not the case. That's not the case. And that's one of the big things that I hope that many people understand, that if this country is going to change, the country is going to change because we as the constituents and the citizens have said that we're going to change, not because of leadership is going to change. Shaquay, am I wrong in thinking that?
No, you're not wrong at all. And to touch on a point and connect it to what Doc has just said, I think a large reason or consideration to what do you call respectability politics that happens on the congressional level and oftentimes also on the state and local level is a reflection of leaders who have been in place for too long. And when I say too long, I don't mean by the means of not being able to, because we can regard and revere people who have dedicated themselves to service and who feel they are rightly positioned and have the insightful authority to know how to guide us in modern times. But things have changed so rapidly in the past 10 years with the advancement of technology, with the diminishing public interest in politics, that I think there oftentimes when you think of our Nancy Pelosi's, and I'm just using her as an example, but people who have been in political positions for a long time, they don't have the concentric understanding to know how to connect to the electoral bloc they need that is going to sustain the Democratic Party and the American democracy at large. I think that there is hesitancy for them to remove themselves to allow younger leaders to take charge and to lead conversations about where we need to go, because they're concerned. And I'm going to be very clear as a student of history, you know, when you think about the Democratic Party, the party of slavery, there has been so much muddying over the years about what their priorities are and how to separate from corporate interests and how to really stand in the block of what it is that it's become over the past 50 years. I think that there is hesitancy, as you mentioned, from the younger generations to trust the government, which is ironically the very propaganda that's being used to fuel conservative and right-wing arms in the actions they're taking at local and state levels to suppress individuals and to suppress the vote. Is the paranoia, is the skepticism of the American government and how it best serves us. The benevolence of you know, the government as you regard it, Farajii, is not in the forefront of the minds of the younger generation that are underneath us. Millennials certainly have a level of skepticism. Our hope opines on the Obama generation, right? Knowing that we can at least see ourselves in position of control. But the older generation, the baby boomers, if you will, they have to learn how to move out of the way. They have to know when to let us move in and guide the conversation, because we are the way forward. And the tactics that they're used to, it's just not going to work. You know, I as a student of history, I think about what happened after slavery when we had the largest African American electorate representation in the Congress, right? And since then had not, because the very same tactics that are being recycled now were implemented then to ensure that we wouldn't have that authority and that power again. And so, to Bakari's point, we have to educate. We have to create more education media campaigns that can paint the picture bright and clear so people can understand where we are in the timeline of American history and how we don't have to repeat the history, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Shaquay, a couple of folks have chimed in on the remarks you just made. My guy, Epic Change, who watching via YouTube, said, look, right, Shaquay, but in a way that is normal. Older folks have always been hesitant to let younger people take over until they were sure they knew what they were doing.
Right.
Janae checked in and said, younger folks play a role, but if you don't know nothing, then how does that benefit us in these conversations? Term limits. Yeah, it's called voting. You can vote them out. I think that is the belief that younger people don't know, and then therefore, Bakari, you know, we need to stay under people. But the voting suppression situation is deeper. This is about power. This is about resources. And you know, in a moment, Doc, I want you to share your thoughts about the recent gerrymandering and redistricting efforts that are happening across the country. But Bakari, when we talk about those things of power, resources, and staying in power, or keeping people out of power, then that becomes a declaration of war. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if people understand that when you are in wartime, it calls for warlike strategies and tactics. This is not regular time. This is not just any old election. Look, let me just share this with you real quick, and then, Bakari, I'm going to let you say your share. The Republican Party, look at this, folks. It just came across the wire a little bit before we started today. the Republican Party censored their own party members, Liz Cheney and another GOP member, for being on the House panel to investigate the January 6th situation.
Adam Kinzinger.
Adam Kinzinger, thank you. The Republican Party just censored their own party about a demonstration that clearly was quote unquote undemocratic, a demonstration that clearly showed that this democracy, this American experiment is not working or is falling apart, especially for white Americans. And they get mad and they censure their own party for seeking the truth. See, that's what I'm saying. See, we trying to appeal to the morality of a joker. We trying to get them to understand us. They're not even thinking rationally enough to be like, this is good, this is not good. This is a lie, this is the truth. You mean to tell me a whole party is allowed to censor their own party members for seeking the truth, yet you want us to believe that you are the party of the rule of law. You are the party that worries about the Constitution. You are the party that stand on the side of right. How the hell is that possible? Bakari, what's your take?
Farajii, I feel like that was a little bit of a setup.
That is a setup. That's an alley-oop right there. You know how it go.
But I mean, I think to think about, everything that you just said, right? Everything that's at stake. You're talking about power. You're talking about resources. You're talking about access to resources. And I think, the putting it into context that we are at war, I think that, what we see as a strategy and as a tactic historically for generations on generations is this attempt at absolute and total fatigue. I think that, my understanding, and Doc, please chime in. But I feel like my understanding when it comes to the Voting Rights Act's violations is like, we're going to just exhaust you. We're going to make it so difficult. And so, we're going to just keep moving the target until you just give up on trying to hit it at all. So I think that, it's like, they're just multiple battles that we're up against. So I think everything that you said is absolutely right, Farajii. And I think to your earlier point is, what does it look like for us to be on the offensive? And I think part of that is creating campaigns about what has worked in the past and what's possible, and challenging people and creating more of like a call to action and a call for folks to chime in. The work that I do is not as directly related to voting rights, so I don't feel like I have the utmost authority to speak in that space. But I do know that creativity and adding vitality to all of our movements and creating spaces that become more attractive and compel our folks to engage is what I think that the guiding principle in the work that all four of us do. So.
Absolutely. Doc, I mean, what I'm seeing from the Republican Party is not a party that you can just deal with on the basis of trying to reach across the aisle. I'm not seeing that type of party. I'm not seeing a group of people who you can really have a negotiation with, you know what I mean? Or a real conversation, because this action, just this recent action that came out today, is just a sign to me that, oh no, y'all not even thinking logical. Y'all not even thinking rationally. You rather destroy your own country than to admit to the truth. You rather go down in a ball of flames and a lie than to admit to the truth that you're wrong.
Is that not what the Civil War was about?
That's the nature of white supremacy, right? It can't help itself. It can't help itself. So it's doomed to essentially self-destruct, right? We know that, I mean, across all of these spaces, whether it's voting, technology, which we spoke about earlier today, environmental justice, on all of these fronts, we are in spaces that we just really can't sustain anymore. So it's like a lot of these systems are crumbling before their eyes. And I think Shakoya kind of spoke to this before, the projections that we see for what this country will look like, it's becoming more and more melanated. So of course, I think that just understanding the space and time that we live in, that we're fortunate enough to be in 2022, and what the next years and years are going to come to, that come to pass will look like. We see a lot of folks that are living in fear and scarcity, and wanting to uphold these walls that are bound to come tumbling down. And I think it's important to know that, as Doc said, that, we're seeing an uptick in terms of the violations. And that just means that folks are holding on even tighter and not wanting to let go until, as they say, the fat lady actually sings. So.
And Doc, what's your take on that, Doc?
Well, I may shake this up a little bit.
Shake it up, brother. Shake it up.
I've been voting since 71. And I would say this. I think neither party deserves African Americans to be in their party. I think we have been used and abused, hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray. I think this recent non-movement on the 2 voting rights laws is one of the greatest insults ever. I think it's time we need to politically strategize in such a way and say to hell with the Democrats and the Republicans. It's time we did our own thing, voted what's in our best interest, and right now neither one are in our best interest.
Doc, that says that means a lot coming from a man like you, because we've known each other for years, based on the work we've done in Baltimore. But that says a lot when you're at that point. I never thought that I would see you be at that point, to be honest, brother.
I never thought I would be there myself.
But you being a voting rights specialist, an advocate, you have always had, kept people's hope alive, so to speak, in this system, to get involved. For you to get to a point to say, we might have to think about something else at this point.
Let me give you one quick example. Example. Here in Baltimore City, we're Democrats, African Americans are in the majority, but we are allowing ourselves to have voting sites where the largest area that has African Americans is considered to be the Western District. We got blacks and whites, Democrats and Republicans on the election board. We have gone 10 years when the largest populated area does not have an early voting site. If that's not voter suppression, I don't know what is. And neither party wants to address the issue. And we elected some old folks and some young folks. Neither one want to address the injustices that are taking place right in front of our eyes. And I'm saying, if the Democrats aren't going to help us, Republicans are going to help us, kick both of them to the curb. Let's do our own thing.
Shaquaya?
I think Doc's point is very important, and I've long thought that we needed I've long thought that we needed to follow in the steps of Fannie Lou Hamer, those who at different points in history made an attempt to create a separate voting party for disenfranchised communities. This is not restrictive to African American communities. This includes other communities of color who have been shut out of the Democratic and Republican parties for long. And I think that there could be that take. Of course, some people may consider that a more radical position, to consider how do you actually unyoke those with fiscal in terms of people of color, those who are tied fiscally to the Democratic and Republican Party. How do we pull them out from that to even create such an entity? But I would compliment what Doc has said by saying that we know the real power when it comes to political power boils down to money, right? We know that campaigns are reflective of corporate and wealth interests. And I think there needs to be more strategic. I don't think this, I know this. I know we're gonna have to take a break in a little bit, but if we have time when we come back, I'd love to talk about what I was able to observe and understand as I became involved in some political lobbying groups adjacent to both the Democratic and Republican Party as a student leader at Morgan State University, and what I was able to truly understand conduct grassroots organizing. You see, Republicans don't start with their voters, they start with their children. There are systems and pipelines in place to condition the identity, the organizing methods about how you prepare people for political position or political involvement. And we do not have those strategic pipelines in the Democratic Party. I think whether we create a party of our own or we, continue to try to influence the Democratic Party to work on our behalf, there just needs to be more institutional advancement of Black leadership and Black money in how we operate in politics.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. Look, I got to take a quick pause. When we come back, panel, I want y'all to just stay with us just for the final few moments, because I feel like there's one more element, and Shaquaya, you hit the nail right on the head. There's that part, Doc, that we got to talk about just for a few minutes at least to give our people just something to hold on to for the weekend till we come back on Monday. But we need to talk about that part of Black leadership involved in this. It's not radical thought. When you are in a war, they say it's all's well in war, or, pretty much anything goes in war, and it is not anything goes. But when you're talking about fighting for your survival, when any animal is confronted and is backed into a corner, no living organism just crowds itself and says, come on with my ass. No, you fight for your life. And in America, Black people, we have to fight for our lives. We say that Black lives matter, but we got to fight to let the country know that we are serious about about saving each other. We got to fight for our lives, whether it's in education, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in politics. We have to fight like hell for our lives. And if we don't, guess what's going to happen? We'll die, because nobody's going to fight for us. No one is coming to save us. It's either us or it's none. That's what it comes down to. And if we have allies, if we have partners, if we have folks from the other communities that want to join on, that is all well and good. But they have to have the same level of urgency that we have, that if you don't fight all the way to the end, if you don't fight as hard as we do, if you don't fight with the same intensity and passion, if you don't fight with the spirit that you're not just fighting for yourself, but you're fighting for your children, then your allyship, your partnership, it ain't worth nothing. We got to take a quick pause. When we come back, let's wrap up our conversation about voting rights in America. Stay riding with us. It's The Culture on Black Star Network.
On the next Get Wealthy, why Black women are deeper in student loan debt than anyone else.
I wanted to be the next Connie Chung. Nothing was going to get in my way. What was placed in front of me was a promissory note that said that, hey, if you sign this document, you can be able to achieve your dream, not really understanding the full foresight of what I was going to be experiencing right after college.
Learn how you can turn it around and get wealthy in the process. Right here on Black Star Network with me, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, host of Get Wealthy.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
It's time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice
to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on that.
Hey, Black, I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
You dig?
Folks, we've been talking about the attack on voting rights in this country, talking about various ways that voter suppression continues to occur. And in a year like this, where we go back to the ballot box to vote in our next local, statewide, and even in some cases our national representatives, we are still confronted with the reality that voter suppression is here, that racism is here, and that there is an effort to keep Black folks, to keep brown folks, to keep marginalized communities from going to the ballot box. And so I've been having this fantastic conversation with the former president of the Baltimore chapter of the NAACP and SCLC, Marvin Doc Cheatham, and with Culture Crew member Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an activist, an educator, and Bakari Jones, who is an activist and strategic planner as well. I want to make sure that we wrap up this conversation, family, with the right tone, because just as much as we talk about what Republicans are doing and Democrats are not doing, there is still that portion where we have to talk about what is the next step for Black leadership to do. Because Doc, you've been doing Black leadership work for years. Work with the NAACP, SCLC, all of these great civil rights organizations. Are they doing enough to make sure that the political voice of Black people is going to be protected? And if not, then what do we need to do at this point? Or is it all just too late, Doc?
I would close and say this. It's a new term I'm using, racial economics. And I think until and unless we look at everything economically as it relates to race, such as how you don't hire a qualified Black football coach, we got to look at not the coaching, we got to look at the ownership. We got to look at economics as it relates to everything dealing with us as a race, because I think that's where the fundamental issues need to be discussed. And that will basically involve us in a discussion to talk about the real things. The real things are we are still being discriminated against, and they're using games and ploys to not address the racism that we have in America. And this football issue coming out now, it's going to be a great one for us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shaquaya and then Bakari. Shaquaya, what's your final remarks on this Black leadership? I mean, what needs to be done to activate them, to get them in a space where they're not seeing this just as a political discourse, but they're seeing this as a declaration of war?
Well, on a molecular level, I think the conditions as they may will influence Black leadership to take this more seriously, because without their voting bloc, they can't have power themselves. But on a each one teach one, right? So there needs to be a counterpart of, as we talked about throughout this entire segment, campaigns, education efforts in communities on a grassroots level that pair with a strategic movement that's happening on local levels so far as legislation and advocacy. I think that Black leadership has long been drawn to follow the bullpen, you know, in the sense of what media is concerned about, or what are larger issues that are being considered as priorities of the Democratic Party. But we need to continuously hone in on what is affecting communities and keep those as priorities in how we lead. And I'm saying we, I'm not elected in position, but I think that elected officials are at the forefront of this fight and have to be the ones to truly pay attention to what matters right now, rather than following what's being talked about at large.
Bakari?
I agree with everything that Doc has said in terms of investigating more around race and economics. And as Shakoy, I think with engaging more around advocacy and education. I think that those are the things that our leaders need to hear, that we're actively engaged. I think that I would say, to kind of add on or tack on to the end of Shakoy's points, I think our leadership is often, we often hear from just one small group of people. So I think the place that we need to sort of land on and end on is like, what are the ways where we can kind of just take more accountability for ourselves and say that we can speak up a bit more and let our elected officials know, hey, this is something that is important to me. This is something that I'm concerned about. This is something that's on my radar. So I think the challenge would be to ask ourselves, and this is a question I'm asking myself, like, what are the ways that I can be more engaged on a local and grassroots level?
Absolutely.
I think both of y'all need to run for office, both of you.
Oh, you said they should run for office, Doc?
That's right.
I hope you mean Farajii. I got you, Farajii. I'm on the campaign.
No, don't start that. Don't start that, man. We don't need that on social media. We need no campaigns. Next thing you know, I'm hiring Doc to be my campaign manager.
There you go.
Look, I appreciate each and every one of you. I think all of you have said something that of substance, but more importantly, y'all are on point, because I feel like, just this whole conversation, it continues to be a real. Look, we if we don't change how we have conversations, we can't change our actions. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. So I appreciate each and every one of you. Marvin Doc Cheatham, former president of the Baltimore NAACP, LCLC, and voting rights advocate. Shaquaya McKenzie, who is an activist and educator, and Bakari Jones, who is an entrepreneur, strategic planner, and an activist within the LGBTQIA community. Thank you all for being on the program with me tonight. Folks, before we wrap up here, I just want to share with you just a final word really quickly. All this week, we have been trying to do our best to make sure that we've been bringing you these conversations. And I have to say, after a very, very eventful week, I am just so grateful. And I just wanted to say thank you for tuning into The Culture. We put a lot of time into thinking about this show, how we were going to present this show, and going through this first week of having this show. And the response that we've gotten has been truly just, humbling and just amazing. And the purpose of this show is very simple, folks. We are looking at our culture. We're looking at how we are doing things and asking the question, can we do things better? Can we do our government better? Can we educate better? Can we engage socially better? Can we become better human beings? And if that is not the end, if that is not the case, then I don't want it. I'm at a point in my life, folks, where I need to make an impact. I'm not talking about making more money, not talking about wasting time doing something that I don't love. I need to make impact on people's lives. And if that's not a part of the conversation, then guess what? I don't want to be speaking. So this culture, the culture, is the place that, we start the conversation. But my hope and prayer is that we can take the conversation to the next level and impact someone's life. I want to thank you so much for joining me for tonight's edition of The Culture. Make sure you support Black Star Network. Make sure you go onto any paid platform and show your support. Just sign up. You see it at the bottom of the screen here. Make sure you show your support for Black Star Network. And of course, stay tuned. Up next, we got more great programming, but make sure you tune into Roland Martin Unfiltered right here on Black Star Network. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk to each other on Monday for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.